Well, thank you for everyone who's joined us this morning. We're going to be sharing our reflections on a NIHR doctoral training camp that myself and Kathy attended. And we're also very happily being accompanied by Stephen Wotton, who is also the NIHR lead for the camp as well. So just to give you a brief overview of this morning, we're going to have an overview of what the camp actually was. So Dr. Steve Wotton is kindly going to share his thoughts as the NIHR lead for this programme. He's also an associate professor in nutrition and is the infrastructure lead at the Southampton NIHR Biomedical Research Centre at the University of Southampton. God, that's quite a mouthful, Stephen.
It is, isn't
it? Goodness me. And then myself and Kathy will be sharing our reflections on attending the doctoral training camp. My name is Melanie and I'm a research associate at the Cicely Saunders Institute at King's College London. And Kathy is a senior nurse lecturer at the University of West England.
Hi, everyone.
Just to round things off at the end, we're going to have a bit of a networking and discussion opportunity to talk about kind of the challenges of thinking about applying for postdoctoral funding. And then we'll kind of finish with some sort of signposting about some different training events that are upcoming as part of the incubator. So I'll just hand over to Stephen, who will be sharing the introduction to the camp itself.
So if you close your share, I'll open mine. So you should have that on screen.
Yep.
Okay, well, can I thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts from the NIHR Academy on our doctoral research training camp. It is a fave of ours. We think it's absolutely fabulous. I'm getting that in early just to get the point of, you know where I'm coming from. We've put a lot of effort into running these training camps, and we've just completed the 16th, and we're just starting plans now for the 17th for next year. What I'm going to do is just give you a little bit about why we have a training camp and what to expect, and then I'm interested to hear what our colleagues have to say about what their experience was like, see if it mirrors with ours. I'm presenting this on behalf of myself and Wendy Baird, who's the Associate Dean for Infrastructure. Unfortunately, Wendy couldn't be with us today, but she sends you her very best regards. So what is the camp? Well, the camp's a 3-day in-person event. We decided we wanted actually to have it as a camp. In other words, you come in, you enter and you leave at the end of the camp, and you don't leave the camp while you're there, because we really want to focus everybody's mind on the task in hand. And it's intended to help develop you or anybody else as a researcher within a health services, clinical research, social care setting. And as you'll see, not only do we have the 3-day in-person event, because of the demand to access the camp, we decided we would also offer online broadcast of day one, the plenary sessions. I'll come back to that in a moment. It came about because those of us in the Academy acknowledged the need to help doctoral fellows to feel part of the NIHR family. I was involved in setting up the first biomedical infrastructure in Southampton, and I know how easy it is for people to exist in a centre without actually realising who NIHR is, and if you're supported out of the infrastructure, to actually feel part of something. So we really wanted to create the NIHR family and to increase confidence in applying for future funding, not just with NIHR, but with any funder. And it's relatively unique amongst the NIHR offers in that it's about investing in you. It's not about your science. It's not about your clinical work. It's very much about you as a person and helping you in your development as an academic. We have, as I say, 2 offerings. Originally, which is just the in-person, but we now have for online delegates. They get a chance to listen live to the plenary speakers, and it's all about inspiring and guiding through some of the key things you need to consider when preparing an application. We have 2 themes for the camp. and we've tended to stick with the application theme for the last sort of 7 years now. The other theme we're considering is also a communication theme, where we get you to consider how you communicate your work. And we're now debating whether we will have a communicate or an application-based theme for next year. We had over 120 people online continuously, and we probably had about 250 people dropping in and dropping out over the course of the day. For the in-person delegates, they get to hear from the plenary speakers, but also get a chance to practice their skills around attracting further funding and how to thrive. I like the word. This is a nice word from the Academy, to thrive as an academic. And every year we have over 70 people in the camp. I think the highest we've had is 86. We want to challenge you. Some people have called it a boot camp because that's at times how it might feel, but it's to challenge you in a safe space. It's to recognize that it's not always easy to work under pressure, but we do want to challenge people. We want to enthuse and inspire. We want to encourage you through shared experience and very much equip you for the next stage of your research journey. And that is in terms of applying for research funding once you've completed your doctorate. We want to get you to experience the challenges and benefits of working together. Sometimes it's not easy to work with people you don't know and you have a very different outlook or background to you, but it's important that you learn and experience working together. And we also were required to consider the issues around PPIE, both in inclusion and engagement, and also the issues in and around equity and inclusivity. Oops. The structure of the camp is day one is that combined hybrid online and in person with the plenary presentations, and then we set the scene and we get you to meet in groups of 8 or so. We introduce you to a mentor who's an experienced researcher and public contributors to act as guides through the process. Day 2, you work in groups to prepare an application and a presentation. And on day 3, you get the opportunity to defend your research proposal to a panel. It sounds very straightforward, doesn't it? That's all you've got to do. It's a little bit more tense and engaging than that. So in the plenary sessions, we invite people along who we think will share their experiences. They've all gone through the journeys that you're going through, and it's all very much around inspiring and equipping people with the thought process, if you like, of how to advance their careers. This year we have Marion Knight, who's the newly appointed Scientific Director of Infrastructure. She used to be the chair of the RFPB. Ben Bowers is a nurse by profession who literally just a couple of days before speaking at camp was appointed a chair and is now Professor Bowers. So we're all delighted for him because we've seen him grow through joining the camp right at the very beginning, going through his academic career and sharing that academic career with us. We have G.J. Melendez-Torres, who's one of the Associate Deans of the Academy. He's a social and clinical epidemiologist, and he has a very unique approach to presenting his work. He doesn't use slides or anything. He forces people to think. And then we have Becky Kearney, who's a clinical trialist from one of the CTUs, who talked about how to sell yourself in your project, bringing up not only her experience as a trialist, but also a panelist on various panels for NIHR. We also had Zhang Zhengzhao, who's a pharmacist, and he's an early career researcher, but he's also looking to develop an entrepreneur arm to his interest. As I say, these were presented in the room and broadcast live to registered online delegates. Everybody can access that, and I commend you to look at the NIHR TV YouTube channel. And if you want details of that, I'm quite happy to put that in the chat as well. So we start with the plenaries, and that's all very much about sharing, inspiring and equipping. And then we leave our inline delegates in the hands of Vicky Goodwin, who's the Associate Director for the camp. And Vicky then helps people go through any of the issues raised in the online presentations. Whereas I then take the room. And in the room, we have, as I say, about 70 people put into 8 groups, and we give them a task. It feels a bit like The Apprentice. You're bundled into groups and you're asked to do something. And what we have created is a fictitious, please don't bother looking it up, funding call, Living and Aging Well. And the reason we've chosen this type of scheme, if you like, or call, was because it was very much around public health and social care. It was deliberately not picking up on one of the clinical specialty themes because we felt that would be unfair for some and advantageous to others. It has a very defined remit, and basically you're applying up for £500,000 over 3 years. We endeavour to make it as real as possible. We use the same forms as the RFPB, finance forms, PPIE and everything. And it's a very challenging process. I'm sure Melanie will offer her views on that in a moment. We make no apology. We want to challenge it. We want to make it difficult. If, in essence, you have to prepare and submit a grant application in 24 hours. And then on the final day, you present it to the panel, and that's a formal one-person pitch. The rest of the team pick up for the questions, and we have a very demanding panel who ask very difficult and challenging questions. If I said that to most people, as we did here, how confident are you in putting an application together? We always have one who says that they're very confident, but we'll park them for the moment. And then we look at the rest. And when we look at the rest, most people are uncertain. And that's not surprising. When you're faced with an NIHR application form, it is considerable. And NIHR know that it is a very lengthy and detailed document, and it has to be because of due diligence to give you up to £500,000 under RFPB in the first instance. So people aren't very confident, and I think when I announce what they've got to do, I think it's fair to say that there was a sense of shock and awe and wonder in the room and disbelief. Nobody really genuinely felt as though they could do this in 24 hours. People were then sent off into their groups and meet their mentor and their PPI, their public contributor, and then it's a race against the clock. I wish I could have shown you the video from the video montage at the end of the event, because it really does capture the sense of urgency. Unfortunately, we haven't got permissions yet to release it. And that's 24 hours. And when I say there is a deadline, it is an absolute deadline. Myself and the finance director have to sign the forms before they can be submitted. And I can honestly say it's a bit of a crazy moment as people dash up at the last minute and forget to do things. Following, then you have a nice dinner and another inspirational speaker. And then the following morning, we have a pitch to the panel. And it is, we pull no punches. It is a full-on challenge. And you have 5 minutes to sell your proposal. And then you have 10 minutes of questions that follow. I think it's fair to say it is very challenging. When we ask people how they felt after completing the task, I think you can see there's a big switch in terms of confidence. People are much more confident and much better equipped to submit an application. From our point of view, we want to share this as widely as we can. The Department of Health only gives us enough money to run one event a year, and we're very keen to hear from people who've been on the event about how they think we can improve it. We're very keen to hear from people who are on the online end, because we want to know how we can broaden that opportunity for more people. And it's a great laugh, it's tears, it's happiness, it's everything. But you can see the shot at the end of the day. I think people were quite happy to have had the opportunity to be there. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions or any points anybody wants to ask about my little bit. Thank you, Katie. Oh, you're online. I can hear you now.
Thanks so much, Steve. That was a great overview of the camp, and yeah, it brings back so many memories thinking about this. Yeah, back in July.
We did have a stopwatch in the room which was counting down, and it was the most onerous looking thing you can ever think of, watching it coming in and taking advice and seeing the clock counting down. But as soon as we can offer you the video montage, we will, because I think I couldn't do it justice. If you hadn't been there, you won't have had the opportunity to experience just the joy and the pain and the anguish.
Shall we, if there's no immediate questions,
Yep.
well, then let me check the chat. Oh, thanks, Katie. I can see. Yeah, if you want to put questions in the chat, you're more than welcome. Melanie, should we go on to giving our reflections, and then it might be that people can bring questions. We're going to have some room for discussion, so at that point people will get a chance to kind of chat a little bit more, and maybe questions will come up and be able to be asked at that point. So if we let you know how, our side of it. And
Sorry, my screen's gone very funny.
Okay.
Just bear with me a moment.
Yeah, you carry on.
There we go.
I'll take the opportunity to say thank you to the Palliative Care Research Incubator, because that's how Melanie and I were able to attend. So the opportunity to attend the training camp was via being members of the incubator. So, for those of you that have joined the incubator, and, we're obviously hoping that it's going to have benefit for you as early and mid-career researchers. So it's really an illustration, whilst, as Steve said, it is limited on numbers to attend the camp. It's not something that is available to everyone, and we're very grateful that we were able to attend, but it is a really good example of the amazing opportunity that we're already feeling from the incubator, even as young as it is at the moment. So yeah, huge thank you on behalf of both of us to the incubator for that. Melanie, you're back on.
Great, it's working.
I'll let you carry on.
The technology is always a scary bit of these things, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah, just to echo everything that Kathy said, and yeah, Steve, I was definitely in the unconfident camp when I first started, and I definitely felt significantly more confident towards the end. And I think these camps are great opportunities because, as you've kind of said, the forms are scary, they are daunting, and you look at it and you think, how on earth am I going to pull something like this together? And actually it was feasible. There was a lot of running towards the end, people literally dashing with forms to get Steve and finance to sign them, but we did it and we got it over the line. So Kathy and I are just going to share some kind of takeaway things that we've really taken from the camp and what we're probably going to be using when we start thinking about applying for postdoctoral funding. So one of the key things, I guess, in any types of research that you do is around developing a strong question and being able to sell it. And the real focus that we kind of took away from this camp was the importance of clarity and focusing that question. So I don't know about people on the call, but sometimes when I'm asked about research, I can be a bit like, well, I'm doing this and this is kind of what I think I'm going to do. But actually, what you need to be doing, particularly in these applications, is having a really strong opener. And that was really kind of contextualized by this concept to having a problem, gap, and hook. So it's definitely as it sounds. So your problem is being able to define what issue or challenge your research particularly addresses. Your gap is identifying what's missing in the existing knowledge and practice. But then the thing that I'd often not thought about before was the concept of the hook. So explaining why this research matters now. So you're being able to catch your audience's attention, in this case, the panel, by linking to kind of what the wider impact of your work is going to be, or perhaps why this is urgent and needs to happen now. So that really moves on to the idea of thinking about not just what you want to do, but actually why it matters. So it's this idea of building in kind of impact very much from the beginning. So you're not just saying, this is what I want to do, but actually this is what you think the outcome is going to be. So it's about moving beyond describing your project as it is, but actually being able to demonstrate what its significance might be and what the relevance might be, and what the impact therefore might be for policy, practice, and for patient outcomes. So it's really about highlighting who your research is going to benefit and what the findings will make, what difference they're going to make rather. And Steve very helpfully set this additional activity whilst we're trying to frantically pull the proposal together, where he pretended to be a civil servant and he went round each of the groups and we had a minute spiel to basically sell what the impact of what our research was going to be from a policy perspective. So that was a lovely thing that Steve threw in for us to do on top of everything else. But it was really an important task to be able to kind of bring together basically not just what we're doing, but actually what is the end result of this work. Another key thing that we took away was this idea of balancing ambition with feasibility. So I think it's quite easy, and I'm definitely guilty of trying to do too much. I want to solve all the problems all at once. But actually, this camp was really clear that while ambitious ideas attract interest, the key thing that you want to demonstrate is that what you want to do is deliverable. So you want a clear and achievable plan that is proportionate to the resources and time that you have. A really basic example is there's no good saying that you want to do, a full-scale randomized control trial, but you only want £5,000 in a month to do it. That's not going to be feasible. That's not going to be deliverable with that resources and level of time that you have. So the key thing around putting together these proposals is really having a very clear focus, and that you want things to be methodologically rigorous. And that in itself is more important than trying to do everything all at once. Another key thing we took away from the camp was about learning from other people's career experiences. So we had lots of inspirational speakers, the kind of plenary sessions that Steve has talked about. And the three things that we really took away from that was firstly this concept of resilience. So rarely did we hear any of the kind of inspirational speakers say that everything had been straightforward, that they'd gotten every grant they'd ever applied for, that every opportunity that had come their way had been fruitful. Actually, a lot of the time, their careers were kind of characterized by failure. And what I mean by that is that kind of rejections and having to refine stuff and having to try again, and to have that resilience and not to take things personally if you don't get things sort of straight away. Another part of that is seizing opportunities. So lots of the speakers talk about the fact that lots of opportunities tend to arise when they least expected it, or when they thought that perhaps it wasn't the right time. And actually, sometimes you just have to be a bit brave and you just have to say yes and give things a go. Another key thing was about building networks. So often that relationships, that those conversations with individuals on a one-to-one basis tend to be more fruitful and open more doors than kind of other formal applications do. So it's really about using networks such as the new incubator that we have here, and how important that is to build connections, find mentors, find people's careers that you find inspiring, and being able to kind of network with them and share ideas and collaborate. Collaboration is really important from this type of proposal perspective, because often collaborative projects often increase your success of being able to achieve funding. And that's usually because it generates richer research. So it's about thinking strategically about what different levels of expertise you might be, because actually what we learned on the camp is actually diversity in our different groups where we were kind of randomly put together is actually what ultimately strengthened our applications. Kathy and I joked that networking is a bit like dating, in the sense that you just have to be a bit brave. It's quite terrifying to put yourself out there, go and talk to someone's career who inspires you. But really, we talked about this concept of, if anyone's had the joy of using Tinder, of swiping right. So when you meet someone whose interests align with your own, or you want to understand more about, okay, well, you had that post and now you have that post, how has that happened? actually it's about being a bit brave and just approaching that person. And what Kathy and I have both found, just generally saying, is that the palliative care research community is small, but it's welcoming. And actually our smaller numbers actually sort of do us a good service, in the sense that people are really generous with their time and people are keen to share resources. So, you know, be brave, swipe right is what Kathy and I say. Another key aspect we took away from this was finance and resources. So I'll be honest, I find the finance aspect of applying for applications pretty terrifying. And it was one of the things I was really dreading as part of this camp. And what actually the purpose of this camp did is it demystified a lot of how financing and how budgeting works. And so there was a real emphasis that a strong proposal isn't just about being kind of scientifically strong and scientifically robust. It's also about being financially sound as well. So it's not treating financing or budgeting as kind of administrative tasks that you just have to kind of get through, but it's about really demonstrating that you understand how the project will be delivered. So from my kind of takeaway, the group that I was in, you know, we left it quite late in the day. You know, we only had about an hour and a half to pull the finance stuff together, and it was really stressful, and it's not the way that it should be done. And if I were to do it again, I think, you know, plan early, because it takes more time than you think. And actually doing the funding alongside your planning is kind of the best way to tackle that. So if you're building in, you know, a PPI activity, or you know that you're going to need particular training, or there's going to be a dissemination event, actually build that costing in as you're kind of planning your proposal. The other key thing that we talked about was actually using the finance experts. So at the camp, we had a finance little group that we could go to, and we could share, like, we're thinking of doing this, we're thinking of doing that, you know, how does this sound? And they were there to kind of point out, well, actually, you haven't thought about training, you haven't thought about travel. You said you're going to have your PPI member do this analysis, but actually, have you thought about what their training costs might be? So actually using them to ensure that your proposal is credible and accurate is also really important as well. And I'll just hand over to Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie. I'm going to talk a little bit about that teamwork and collaboration. So at the end of day one, when we were put into our teams of, sort of like Steve said, kind of 8-10 people, and we had a public contributor and a mentor, and we went off to rooms, had to scurry around the hotel and find our rooms and settle in with these individuals that likely I hadn't spoken to anyone. I had spoken to a few people on the camp already, and I hadn't spoken to anyone that ended up in my group. So I was thinking about this and thinking, we're all quite good at saying, oh, we're great at working in a team. And then I feel like this was sort of a really pure test of that, actually, to be in a room full of people you didn't know and asked to do what was it felt daunting and quite ambitious to be able to pull this application together. As Melanie said, we had access to specialists, so finance, PPI experts, and also the directors of the research programme, and we could go to them for feedback during the time. At the end of day one, I volunteered to co-team lead in my group along with another member of the team. I don't know if I did that possibly because I was one of the oldest people in the room, and maybe I felt a bit like a mother hen, I'm not sure. So I did that, and that actually was really illuminating for me in terms at the end of the application process. I remember feeling a bit like actually the bit that I had contributed to the application form were perhaps not the strongest parts of our application. They weren't perhaps the most detailed, the most fully kind of formed. And I talked it through with our mentor and kind of came to the realization that if you're going to lead a team, you can't always do all the jobs of the team as well. So leading the team is a job in and of itself. And I think be kind to yourself because you're doing a lot. You're trying to pull together the timing. There was a lot of kind of making sure everyone was okay, actually, that went on. So that was really quite a big learning point for me. We had a really diverse range of skills in the group, both professionally. So some people were healthcare professionals. I'm a nurse by background. Others came from more biomedical sciences, medicine. We had someone from oral health. So it was a really diverse range. And it wasn't just their professional backgrounds, it was also methodologically, which was a real strength, because if it had just been me in the room, there would have been a lot of qualitative chatting and talking and putting that together. But actually what it meant was that we could come up with a real kind of mixed methods and fully rounded application that drew on lots of different methodologies in order to come at our programme. Everyone was motivated, enthusiastic. That really helps. That works really well when everyone sort of felt the pressure, but in a good way. It was that good level of stress of actually we're all working towards this at pace. You needed to trust the team. So these were people that I didn't know. We didn't know each other. And yet we needed to trust that we were all going to be in it for each other and support each other through. And that we did with the help of the mentor as well. We got lots of feedback from the research programme team. And it was important to listen really, really well to that feedback, even if it's sort of the feedback was actually good, but not quite right. You know, it was a little bit like that. So, and going, oh, how much does that set us back? And how much time have we now got? And kind of that balance between how to incorporate new ideas and new direction whilst not losing all of the momentum that we already had. So that was something that took a lot of resilience, I would say, to kind of move forward with ideas. There were challenges. So we didn't have time to get to know each other. There was a sort of introductory round, and then you were straight into, right, who's going to do what? Who's good at this? Who wants to do this? And we didn't all have the same communication styles or the same working styles. So it took a lot of, I think, humility and sensitivity and interpersonal skills to be able to get through that kind of 24-hour period, to come out the other end thinking, yes, we did it as a team, and for everyone to feel heard and valued in that team. So that's something that I think is important to take forward. You're not always going to work with people that you know and that maybe work like you. So it's really important to go into those situations with that sensitivity and respect for how everyone's coming at the problem. And I think that's something that I really took away from it. We had to identify what idea we wanted to follow through with, what was the research question we wanted to answer, and there was lots of negotiation in that. So for me and the other co-team lead in the group to kind of facilitate those discussions required quite a lot of like diplomacy skills as well. So it wasn't just the research skills you're bringing to this, it's a lot of interpersonal skills. And Melanie and I were talking that actually coming from such a range of backgrounds means that there's quite a lot of unfamiliar terminology between us. So for those that weren't clinical versus those that were clinical, there was quite a lot of terminology and perhaps jargon that can be a bit of a barrier when you're trying to move forward. So it's just, I guess, a reminder that that interprofessional jargon, whilst it's a shorthand for everyone, so long as they're in the know, it can be quite exclusionary when you're in a more diverse team. So really thinking about language and how important that is. So I think all of these skills that we came through with are really important for that grant collaboration in future, and pulling together teams, sometimes at short notice, hopefully not in a 24-hour period. Again, I'm kind of proud we did it. Don't want to do it again. But I think, you know, things do happen at pace in this world. You haven't always got a long time to put things together. So being able to work at speed with people you don't always know is a real skill. And I'm glad that it's one that I got to kind of road test a little bit before perhaps a more real situation. Next slide, please, Melanie. Patient and public involvement and engagement was, I think, the thing that shone through the camp probably the most for me. We were asked to get involved with this idea prior to attending the camp. At the camp, we had public contributors in every team. We had PPIE experts on the panel and also in the room to support with the development of the applications and in the office. So for me, it was really central, and I came away feeling absolutely certain of the commitment from the NIHR to make sure that PPIE is designed in from the beginning of projects. That is how you're going to be, you know, successful in applying for funding for the NIHR, and I'm sure it's true of other organisations as well, because it's absolutely crucial that that we're listening to people whose lives are going to be affected by the research that takes place. Una Renard was the PPI expert and on the panel member at the camp. And there's a link in these slides, which I'm sure will come round to you, of a really inspirational talk that she gives about PPIE from her perspective. And she uses this phrase, communities we listen to less. And I think that's just really sums it up for me, actually. We shouldn't be doing work about communities if we're not listening to what they want and what is going to impact them in a positive way. We can't deign to know that better than the people living these realities themselves. So for me, it came through really strongly. You need to think it through, and it needs to not be tokenistic. It needs to be real world stuff. So who are you going to ask? How do you know them? How are you going to access them? How are they going to be involved? How are you going to pay them? That's really important. You need to value the time that people give up for your projects. It's fundamental to the application process and a requirement of NIHR funding now. So you won't be funded without a really good PPI plan. Design it in from the start and fully cost it. Remember, you might need to cost also for training needs for your public contributors. So this is a two-way street. This isn't just what can your public contributor do for you. Actually, you might be able to provide training and development for them as well. So think about that and cost that in. Put in money for that. If it doesn't get used, that's okay. But it'd be a shame not to be able to offer these things. And think about the roles within the research team. So in our application, we had a public co-applicant as the main part of the team. We also had a PPI lead, one of the researchers, and then you have a PPI advisory team as well, who can talk about the activities that you're planning, how acceptable they are to the people that you're wanting to involve in your research, and how you actually get people involved. How do you make this accessible, engaging, appealing for people to get involved? And I think you do that by listening really well to what people want and responding well to that in a way that is meaningful. I've put a link here as well to NIHR plain English summaries. That's something that we included in our application, and it's written, hopefully you're familiar with plain English summaries, but it's just breaking down your ideas into the most straightforward language to make it the most accessible that it can be. And it was something that was really interesting in our group to do, and our PPI contributor was really fundamental in helping us understand how our messages were coming across. Did I want to say anything else about PPIE? No, I think that might be it. Yeah. Next slide, please, Melanie. Thank you. So I'm just going to mention presenting to the panel as a photograph of a member of my team who was an absolute hero and gave an excellent presentation on behalf of our team before we all had to join her on stage nervously for a Q&A. It felt very, very real world. I don't suppose there's usually sort of 8 other teams in the room watching, but it felt very real world. This was a simulation, but it was taken very seriously. There was no larking about, really, and it was serious. And as Steve said, it was hard. These questions, they weren't candy. You know, they were really very. They challenged us. They pushed us really to think about what we hadn't said in our applications. So what I would say is you need to have a really clear message in the presentation. If you get questions that you don't know the answers to, you need to be honest. You need to take that on the chin, actually, take that graciously and accept that there was things that you hadn't thought about. That's okay, but you need to be, don't try and sort of fudge it on the spot. They'll see that, they'll see you out. Plan who's going to respond to each question. So on the panel, there'll be different people, methodologists, finance director, program director, a PPI expert as well. So they will all have particular questions they want to ask about different aspects of your application. So make sure you know who's going to respond to that. The person who would be the PPI lead in your team who wrote the PPI section needs to be the person to respond to that question, and have a backup as well. You know, if no one really feels they can take the question, does that fall to the team lead? Is that the responsibility there? So have a backup so you're not flailing about thinking, who's going to take this one? And really what those questions from the panel are identifying are the strengths and weaknesses in the application. And it may not, they're not saying that you did something wrong necessarily, rather that you need to explain more, give more detail, clear up any ambiguity. I think when we write, it's very easy to be clear in our own heads, but how that comes across isn't always as unambiguous as we think. And just receiving that feedback well. These are experienced experts in their fields, and what they're telling you is well worth listening to. This stuff is gold. So do listen well, and incorporate it. It'll make your project better in the end. Even if you don't actually get successful on that attempt, that experience and that feedback is going to improve your work for future. And I think just the other thing to say, and I think Steve said it at the beginning, one of the aims of the camp was to really give a better overview of the NIHR and make people feel involved in the NIHR. And I think that was really successfully done. I came away with a much better understanding of the NIHR, of what is expected, of the infrastructure, and actually, fundamentally, that they care deeply about the careers of doctoral researchers, and want to support those careers in a myriad of ways. And the effort and attention that goes into creating this camp and allowing that focus is really quite phenomenal, quite extraordinary. I've never been part of anything like it before. So thank you, Steve, and to the team, because I think it's really quite a phenomenal thing that you do. Thank you. Next slide, Melanie, please. We'll do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. So Melanie's team Empower were the winners of the 16th annual doctoral training camp, winners overall with their application, which is absolutely fantastic. So £500,000 straight into them. And my team, 24 Hours of Daytona, we won the award for Best Patient and Public Involvement as well. So we feel very lucky as an incubator. We've got both of us on those award-winning teams. So we are very proud on the day to receive those awards.
So Candy and Christina, I don't know if you want to kind of talk about the upcoming events that are happening that kind of link to this. We've kind of said about the there's a workshop happening in Newcastle shortly, which is about research questions. Is that right?
Oh, Anna's already going to that. Great.
Yeah, certainly. So I think I'm amazed that you even got past just developing a research question in a day's work. It's really interesting how things can focus the mind. But that day will really help look at the James Lind research priorities and formulate research questions and potential projects around that. Not with the same sort of diversity of participants that you've had will all be from palliative care, I think, but that's a face-to-face in Newcastle. There are still some places available, so please do consider that. It will build on some of the things you've learned today. The webinar on the 27th of November is a piece of research that has looked at the workforce capacity in palliative care that are based in academic organisations and looking at some of the barriers to research careers. And then the fellowship applications workshop. So that's all levels of fellowship. So Gemma, for instance, doctoral fellowships, but also pre-doctoral and postdoctoral aspects of how you might put together a good fellowship application. So like a mini boot camp, but not quite this sort of scale and intensity. And again, focusing solely around palliative care in that. We're very keen to hear from members of the PRA about the sort of things that you would value having as events. So please send us emails or put it in your feedback forms about things that actually you would like more of or that we haven't thought of at all. That would be great.
Just to add to that, the Newcastle event, we're going to duplicate exactly the same event in Bath in February next year. So if you live in the southern end, then come to the Bath one.
The date for that is the 4th of February, isn't it? Now?
Yeah, and that will be on the website very soon to register for.
Perfect. Thank you, Christina. Okay. Thanks, Candy. You're really welcome to contact Melanie and I as well. If there's anything you want to follow up on, our email addresses are there, or you can contact us through the incubator.
Fantastic. Do check out the incubator's resources. So the website is live and the different social media tags that we have. And if you're happy to leave some feedback, then that's very warmly welcomed. Otherwise, thank you for joining and thank you for listening and engaging and asking questions.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you. We'll see you soon.
Bye.